So, warm welcome to the Authentic You podcast today. I am so delighted to be joined by the amazing Henny on today's podcast. Thank you so much for being here, Henny.
Oh, it is such a joy to be sitting in a virtual room with you, Gemma, and to be spending a little bit of time with you. It's lovely.
It's a joy to be sat in a virtual room with you as well. Although part of me is wishing that I was at your beautiful home and retreat space that you have there. I can just glimpse it in the background for those watching on video.
Just little bit of a teasing tree there. Just
Yeah, just those little leaves are just teasing me in, saying, "Come and play." Oh, brilliant! So I'm just going to read out Henny's bio, and then if you want to chip in anything that you want to add to that, Henny. Henny is one amazing lady. I've known her for a few years. So Henny is a writer, coach, podcaster, public speaker, InsightTimer teacher, and retreat host. What an incredible title there. Henny's key focus is self-awareness with self-compassion. Henny helps people make and manage deep and lasting change through deepening self-awareness with self-compassion. And her work is underpinned by the deep understanding of the power of non-judgement and self-compassion in effecting positive, powerful inner change, which she calls practical compassion. And it reflects the changes that she's made in her own life. In 2016, during a period of severe stress, grief, and almost total absence of self-care, Henny became critically ill. Her recovery prompted a time of immense personal and professional change. And as part of this process, taking learnings from her undergraduate studies in sociology and psychology, as well as her career in senior corporate roles, she retrained to support others in their personal and professional change journeys. And throughout this time, she's created the Compassionate Menopause, which is a free community dedicated to supporting women experiencing menopause. She's launched a podcast and she's published not one, but 3 books. Well done, Henny, including My Darling Girl, The Heart of Change, and All the Ways I Tell Myself I Love You. Using a blend of psychology, neuroscience, spiritual connection, and mindfulness, Henny enables each person she works with to find their own answers, their own path. And she lives near Hereford, England, at Barkbrook Farm, which is what is in the beautiful background for those watching the video, where she and her husband spend a lot of time gazing at the view. And their next step is to hold personalised retreats for guests who want to rest in a beautiful space as they learn to care deeply for themselves. What a beautiful bio you have there, Henny. Is there anything you would like to add?
only that it's such an unusual experience to be sat with somebody saying all those words back to us. And obviously, all those things, they're all true. They are all part of who I am and part of what sort of shapes my life. But it's such an interesting experience, and I think there's something that resonates really deeply with the whole concept of your podcast, actually, Gemma. This idea of being able to hold ourselves while someone else is telling us or mirroring back to us what it is that we do or how it is that we show up in the world, without sinking into a kind of, oh, is that really me? And that sort of, that thing that we learn about not wanting to stand fully in our space, not wanting to say, yes, absolutely. All of those things, they're all part of me. I own all of that. And I kind of noticed there was still like a little part that wanted to retreat as you were saying it all. So, I just need to acknowledge her. Just let everyone know that she's in the room with us as well.
I love that. It's beautiful, isn't it? And that is that's part of the topic that we're talking about today, isn't it? Of that self-compassion. How many of us, I know certainly for me in the past, I would have gone, oh no, or tried to downplay it. And part of that self-compassionate journey is just going, yeah, that's me. That's authentically me. Yeah, I love that. And Henny and I, we started this conversation and we both saying that we're feeling a little depleted. So we're going to really show up in that authentic space today, and I'm here with my tea, and we're going to just be really kind to ourselves as we continue this podcast today. I mean, it's always a nourishing conversation when we chat, Henny. But
I was just going to say, I mean, this is my last conversation before I head off onto my big summer break, and I did think, because we were meant to speak earlier in the week, and I did think, actually, gosh, that's interesting that the universe, forces, whatever, have conspired to mean that this is the last conversation. And what a beautiful way of preparing for going off and spending some time with myself is to have this conversation with you, and to be with all the people who are listening now, and collectively really sit with what it feels like to care for ourselves, and to be compassionate, and give ourselves a bit of time.
Amazing.
To rest, you know.
I love that. So where would you like to start, Henny? I know you've got a new book coming out, and I'd love for you to share more about your journey and how we can be more self-compassionate. Where would you like to start?
Oh my gosh, that's such a big question.
It's like a coaching questions, isn't it? Where would you like to start today? You could just sort my whole life.
So rather excitingly, I received a parcel yesterday, in fact, from the printers of a stack of copies of All the Ways I Tell Myself I Love You. So that is about to get sort of distributed, sent out to all the people who've done the pre-orders, which is really exciting. And I think that book in itself is actually a beautiful example of all the ways that we can express self-compassion. And it was something that has been bobbing about in my mind, how we have these kind of ideas, but we're not quite sure how to articulate them, or, and in the past, I think what I would have done is really pushed at it. But a way of expressing compassion is just to allow ourselves to let the idea bob about, and just think, okay, it's not quite ready to be born yet. And then a few months ago, it suddenly appeared in my head, and I knew exactly how to do it. And it's really a series of affirmations and with imagery as metaphor, or metaphor with imagery with affirmations as metaphor to the images, whichever way around you like to think about it. But each one is a means of expressing self-love, and I think that's really what self-compassion comes down to. So that feels quite present in my life right now. And the segue really to the second part of your question is, it's definitely something I have had to learn. And there's a gorgeous Richard Bach, who wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull. He famously said that we teach what we most need to learn. And so I think there's a natural reason why I ended up becoming a compassion-based coach or compassion-based worker, because it was something that I really didn't understand before, and I really, really needed to learn it in order to survive, actually, and certainly in order to thrive.
Amazing. Yeah, that really does resonate for me as well. And sometimes having those awarenesses for us, I was having a conversation with somebody, I think yesterday, about how sometimes we just have to consciously become aware and ask ourselves the question. I know my mindfulness teacher training, it was like, what do I need today? What's my next kindful action step? And you don't always know the answer, do you? But sometimes just asking that question is enough. And I feel like you touched on sort of a few things there. And the first thing that I wanted to say is just how layered this conversation is with self-compassion. It almost feels already like in the film Inception, where we've got these layers of compassion within these dreams within dreams. And it was what you said about the idea of your book was bubbling, and you were like okay with leaving it there. And I just want to pick up on that point first, and then like ask you more about the self-compassion work that you do. Is I think that's like there's some real magic in that, of like, let's allow it to be here and bubble. And for a lot of us that have been in the corporate world, especially, you know, corporate women that really resonate with that real hustle, you know, we have having to get projects delivered, thinking quickly on your feet, you know, projects being pulled, and, you know, all being very much sort of a fast-paced environment, being out of our control. I know certainly from my corporate career, I've kind of developed and I was always rewarded for like doing so much so quickly as well. So I think there's some real beauty in slowing down and just allowing things to just bubble. I think there's a real beauty in that. So I just wanted to like pick up on that and say, like, this is very multifaceted compassion conversation here. Yeah, so I love that you just let it be, and then it birthed itself almost.
Yeah. And you're so right. I mean, that thing of, you know, you and I met working in a very fast-paced corporate environment and high stress. And I am profoundly aware these days of the things that can still activate that stress response for me. And also, I'm deeply aware of maintaining, you know, my measured calm. So I still do work that is, you know, high profile. I'll do public speaking, for example. There might be, you know, several hundred people that I'm talking to, but I'm so aware of the old pattern of believing that in order to prepare for that, you've got to be, I don't know, you've got to, you know, do X, Y, and Z, and that's the only way to prepare for it. Whereas now I prepare in a very different way. And even like today, before coming on this call, so, you know, we've acknowledged we're both feeling, you know, quite inside ourselves, quite, you know, not tired isn't necessarily the right word, but, you know, energy is mellow today. And so I found a piece of music on InsightTimer. It was 2 minutes long. It was really like, it was just gorgeous. Like the energy to it was so lovely. And so I used that as part of my entry into this conversation. So it wasn't about getting busy and starting to, you know, think about, oh, what are all the things Gemma's going to ask me, and like getting agitated. It was about, okay, how can I stay in this mellow energy but still bring, you know, a vibrancy, hopefully, to the conversation as well. And I think, gosh, the unlearning that we have to do when we're making a shift from that old way of thinking into a new way of thinking. And I think there's something else here important as well, Gemma, which is that we can do that shift whilst staying in that same environment. You know, it doesn't mean you've got to throw everything, you know, out with the bathwater. Like you can still inhabit a high pressured environment, but maintain calm through asking yourself, what is the kindest thing I can do right now? And through bringing that self-compassion in, and not feeling as though you have to function to somebody else's timescale all the time, you know. Did that make sense?
It makes sense, and it's brought a memory in which I just wanted to share, and I think recognize you for, which is when we were working in that corporate environment. And I don't know if you remember the day, and I was really struggling with this, like, this concept of working in London, and like the relentlessness of it, and how, you know, especially being so sensitive, how I was feeling. And we had met in the cafe, And I just have a memory of us. I think you were wearing an orange coat. And I have this memory of us being sort of like almost like cuddled together on the sofa in this cafe. And I just felt so nourished by your presence. And we were having a conversation, and you said you were asking me some questions about, working in London. I can't remember the exact questions, but I think they were around like how I could make it more sort of nourishing for me. And I feel like I was literally doing that by being sort of cuddled with you in the corner in the cafe, drinking tea, eating chocolate. I think we were eating dark chocolate. And so I just wanted to like, that memory came in as you were saying it. I was like, oh yes. And I've been really sort of redefining what work means, what play means, what rest means recently as well, and kind of going, what if work could be play? What if work could be rest? And yesterday I was running a quantum breathwork session, and in the morning I was feeling a bit frazzled. I've had quite a full-on week, and I just started to sort of think about this concept. And about 20 minutes into the session, my whole body just went, oh yeah, this is why I'm here. And it was just beautifully grounding, and it was that evidence of like exactly what you're saying. Like we can be like who we are and be in that nourished space. It doesn't matter kind of what's going on for us. And what I'm hearing and what you've said is that kind of it doesn't have to be a fine line between what is what, because when we bring ourselves fully, it doesn't matter if it's work, play, rest, or something else.
And it's the definitions that we create. I love that idea, actually, because I think there's something about these definitions that we create that also create the resistance, which creates the feeling of tension or difficulty. So talking recently with one of my clients, and I often will teach into my clients the simplicity of a hand on the heart, as a practical compassion. It's like way up there as something we all, we have our hand with us, we have our heart with us, we can place our hand on our heart. And she was saying, oh well, it's okay if you do it when you're on your own. And I was just like, I think I might challenge you about that. And I ended up sharing with her how for the last 18 months that I worked in that large multinational corporate where we met, I spent most of my time with my hand on my heart in meetings, in one-to-one conversations, when I was coaching other people. That act is something that just kept bringing me home and grounded me and anchored me and meant that I was okay in a space where I had previously not been okay. And it kept reminding me of how do I want to show up in this moment? I want to be calm, I want to be kind, and I want to be clear. Like that was, that was what I was shifting toward. And so I think there's so much in here about the simplicity of how we can practice self-compassion. Doesn't need to always be the grand gestures.
I've still got my hand on my heart. You reminded me. I was like, oh yeah, this is nice. So I love that. And this is something I really wanted to ask you. It doesn't always have to be the grand gestures, and doesn't always, we love a bubble bath, right? But it doesn't have to be, we kind of hear this self-care is a bubble bath. And I really want to touch on this as well. Like self-care can actually be quite picking up on, Brene Brown's talk about the word courage, and courage coming from the heart. Self-care isn't always fluffy, is it? Tell me more about your perspective on that, Henny. I'd love to know.
I think often self-care is about discipline, actually, and it's just that it's a different kind of discipline. So for example, it might be the discipline of spending a few minutes in your own company in the morning. Now, that if you live in a busy household, that might feel like an impossibility. So then it's about, okay, so where can I build in the discipline and also the communication with others that helps them understand that this is important to me? And that might be a challenging thing, or might feel like it's going to be a challenging thing, you know, helping others respect your boundaries as well. So, you know, both of those things can feel uncomfortable, and therefore we avoid them. And we find ourselves saying, oh, I'd love to do that, but I just can't do that. And actually, I think the self-compassion is going, okay, would I love to do that? If the answer is yes, how can I make that happen? What are the things I need to put in place? And I think also something I often talk about is that we can see self-compassion and self-care, and certainly self-love, as being very kind of esoteric or narcissistic or just really wafty, you know, really like fluffy.
Yeah.
Because we don't really understand what the words mean. It all feels a bit distant. It all feels like something someone else can do. So I think there's also something really powerful about recognizing where we actually are practicing self-compassion in our life. It's just that we might not be calling it that. So the example of the book, you know, I call allowing that idea to float about an act of self-compassion. Now, I could call it laziness. I could call it indecision. I could call it a whole number of things. Mm. But I choose to call it self-compassion. And in the calling it self-compassion, I make it an act of self-compassion. And I also relieve all the stress. Because any stress that I brought into that situation would only be of my own making. And so often that these are artificial deadlines we create. So understand, is it you creating it? In which case, what's the most compassionate way that you can respond to yourself?
Love that. I love that. I love that concept of using like the word and creating that space, which, you know, from the science of like habits and things, is just wonderful as well, because it's sort of like, I'm calling it compassion. So I'm sort of setting an intention that it's compassion, which is going to ripple into more compassion. Yeah. What's popping into my mind at the moment, Henny, is I think we've touched on a little of this already, like making something conscious. So what would you say? Because like you and I both know that like some of these things, like we didn't have the conscious awareness of. So even if, you know, even seeing others kind of role model can sort of help, but then really having that awareness of, okay, I'm tuning in, this is what I'm feeling, or even asking like the questions. What would you say is a good starting point for starting to build more of that conscious awareness of what compassion is that we need?
It's such I think it's such an important question. And it's reminding me of the Viktor Frankl quote, between stimulus and response, you know, so between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies the power and freedom to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and happiness. I think that's pretty much it. So this idea, for me, that quote was fundamentally important. And I would say it to myself each morning. And I couldn't quite understand it. I couldn't quite work out what it meant, but I knew it meant something. And then one day I was like, oh, so it's this thing about, and I started to then be able to talk to clients about it as it's a bit like, you know, a cigarette paper, like the thinnest kind of paper. It's that thing where you can insert something so thin between something happening and your reaction to it.
Mm.
And this, when you can get something very, very thin, very slight between those two things, that's the moment that you're starting to create awareness. And before that is the moment where you go, I can, or it is possible for me to create a space between these two things. And so before that comes the belief that it is possible to build that awareness. And until we have that belief, we're kind of blind to it. You know, that's where I think really that's the kind of difference between being asleep and awake, actually, is that if you're awake enough to be thinking, God, I like the idea of that, then turn toward the belief. Do you have the belief that it's possible to create that space? And it's that then gives us that ever-growing spaciousness that means that we can really become aware of the stuff that's kind of activating us or triggering. I don't really like the word trigger. I prefer activate. The stuff that's kind of activating us, and then to see, okay, so which part of me is getting activated here? And that is just, you know, that level of self-awareness is just so gorgeous, because it's like you've got all the time in the world to work it out then. But when it first starts, and I remember this so acutely, like when it first starts, it's like often you don't have that space until after the thing has happened. In which case, you don't beat yourself up. You go, oh, I spotted it. I mean, it was after the thing happened, but it was okay because I spotted it. And that means I'm building my awareness. And that's awesome. So that's the non-judgement that I talk about.
I love that. I love that. I'm almost seeing it as like a little like process. I can see a little picture. I can sort of see like this, belief, belief. And then what follows through from that is the cigarette paper sort of being able, I believe it can slot in. I slot it in, and then the cigarette paper becomes a reel of paper.
Yeah,
sort of like that process.
I might need to come up with something other than cigarette paper, because I'm not sure that, like, but you know, it's that idea, like it's that thin thing, or maybe it's like a blade of grass or something like that. But you know, it's something that's so delicate. But it is also, it is about really like applauding ourselves, you know, that we've noticed it. Like even if in the activated moment we've responded in a way that we feel shame about, you know, gosh, like that's such a big thing, isn't it? Or we feel anger about, you know, angry with ourselves that we've responded in the way that we have. You can still process those emotions, feel those emotions, and at the same time say, okay, well done for noticing, my darling. You know, well done. Because it's those acts of noticing that get us closer and closer to being able to, you know, to breathe a little more fully.
I love that. And I love the kind of concept of not berating ourselves about things that have happened. And this, you know, this is something I've done time and time again. And I think for a lot of us, you know, on this personal development journey, we kind of go, yeah, like I've had arguments with myself almost where I'm like, yeah, but we've done all this work. We should not be having this reaction. But I've done all the work. It's not like I'm someone that doesn't do the work. Why did I have that reaction? And then we berate ourselves and say we should be somewhere else in that moment. And I love the beauty of just like being compassionate to ourselves. We wouldn't berate a friend over a mistake that they'd made. You know, we would say, like you say, my darling, I can, you know, you can see it now. So different. Next time you're going to choose differently because you felt that. And I think for a lot of people, we have to feel it for ourselves, don't we, to really know to choose differently next time. So it's not a bad thing that we noticed that we didn't have that space between stimulus and response, but feeling the pain of not having it, we can then be kinder to do that next time. And just wanted to like call that out, because I feel I'm not alone with that. And for a lot of people on this journey, we kind of go, we've done this work.
There's one of the poems that I wrote in My Darling Girl, which is, you know, essentially they're a whole series of love letters that I wrote to myself when I was going through my long period of change, and I still, every now and again, one will kind of bubble up and I'll write to myself. But there's one in particular that's really resonating with me as I'm listening to you, which is about, you know, that moment where we go, what, this again? Like, I've done this, you know, that feeling is so resonant with me.
Do you have the book there? Can we actually have a reading by Henny live on, well, not live, but on live-ish on the podcast?
Maybe. Let me just have a little chat amongst yourselves for a moment.
Hi Gemma, how are you? Yeah, thanks Gemma. I'm fine, thanks. I'll just have a little chat with myself. At least I'm not singing to you all. It could be far worse.
I think
we're dancing for those on the video.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, this is actually a different one, but it's
let's go for it. I would love for us to have an extract.
Okay, so this one is My Darling Girl. Here it comes again, that state of flux. Just when you thought everything's settled, die cast, ink set, final thread woven through the tapestry. And then a pinprick of awareness, a sensation rumbling in the deepest distance. At first ignorable. Oh, that. I'm sure it's nothing. Just carry on as we are. Then more insistent. Look, it's fine. Nothing to hear here. Then more insistent still. No, honestly, just don't look at it and I'm sure it'll go away. Until, eventually. Oh, hang on. This thing? Oh, I meant to notice that. This rolling, frothing, churning, rumbling thing that skitters all around. That all-consuming flood of awareness. Yes, that. That thing that takes more energy to ignore than it could ever take to deal with. That thing that makes so much noise you believe it's bigger than you could ever be. Yes, that. It's time to listen up, settle in, and go with the flow.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
It's that thing that, like, you know, I think for many of the people who listen to your podcast, you know, we're all in a certain place of awareness. And so the other thing that can happen is that we come to this point where we just think, I'm done now. I'm there. I'm like, I've sorted, done it, reached that point. And then it all starts feeling uncomfortable again. And it's just like, oh my God, what, really? I've got to go through that again? Well, yes, my darling. You know, it never stops. The unsettle. And that's the beauty, actually. And it's also why self-compassion is so vital, because otherwise you can get to a point where you go, oh my God, well, I'm not good enough then. I haven't done enough work. I thought I had the answers. I clearly haven't. Blah, 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 you know.
There's a spectrum there, isn't there, of unworthiness and ego. And it kind of goes, this is what I've kind of noticed, it can go into like ego of like, I've done the healing, almost a superiority. I find as we work on ourselves and we build worthiness, because I think for a lot of us and a lot of those listening have been on a, you know, people pleaser, low worthiness journey, and we then start to build this worthiness, and it's almost like we don't always know what to do with it. And if we're not careful, we kind of go into this ego where we sort of say, yeah, I've done all the work. And then something like that comes in, like you say, and then we go, oh my gosh, I'm actually broken. And we suddenly pendulum swing back to the unworthiness again. And then we end up in this unworthiness spiral. And then we start to go, oh, maybe I'm not a nice person, maybe I'm not this, maybe I'm not. And we start to kind of, actually where we want to be is that like beautiful space in the middle and that kind of acceptance. So yeah.
Gorgeous. Oh my goodness, it's so true. It's so true. And actually, that's kind of part of the process as well. And I think,
Mm.
you know, as you sort of move along your path and you meet different people and you can see, you know, sometimes you have the benefit of being able to see, like, oh, I remember being in that place,
Mm.
or oh, I'm going to come to that place.
Mm.
And that's because it, even though all of our paths are so different, of course, and all of the things that accompany us on our paths are so different, fundamentally there are, you know, some core staging posts, I think, that we all experience.
And that's kind of that's why we're here, right? And that's also why, like, how I can't even get my words out now. We said we were tired. um, I see that as like, I don't think I would call you a staging post, but maybe like a beautiful tree with a sign, sort of saying like, that's, you know, that's okay, and like I'm here and I've been there, and yeah, like almost holding up a sign to say it's okay. It's
Mm,
okay that you are here.
that's nice.
Mm.
That's nice. I'll be a tree.
I think maybe it is because of your tree that's
My oak.
made me think about the tree when I was looking around for inspiration. So one of the things that I know you want to talk about today was some of the stories that get in the way as us showing up as our authentic selves. And I know we've already touched on some of that, but I wonder if there's more you'd like to add about that. And it's really fascinating because I've started to use that phrase this week. The story I'm telling myself is, and it's so powerful, isn't it? So tell me more about your experience of that, Henny.
So I see that we gather these stories, and sometimes they are handed down to us subconsciously, from our caregivers or through our kind of legacy, our sort of family line or the line of our caregivers. And sometimes they're handed consciously because there is a belief within that story that something about it will keep us safe. So one of mine was pride comes before a fall.
Mm.
So you talk about the kind of ego. So that thing about, you know, if you get too successful in what you do, you are going to fail. You are going to fall. Or if you believe that you're good at something, you're going to fail. So, and now I recognise that that is a story through the family line designed to keep the family safe.
Mm.
And for someone somewhere that will have been true. It doesn't necessarily make it true for me. And that's the thing with these stories, is that even the ones that we might read in the media. So at the moment, I believe that, like me, you don't really consume media and news,
No.
etc. However, we're aware that in the media, in the news, there's lots of fear mongering. That's the reason why we don't consume it.
Yeah.
But the people who are writing those stories and the stories that are threaded through their stories, somewhere down the line, for someone in their world, that story has been true. You can't trust other people. That would be a classic one. It doesn't mean that we have to make that true for ourselves, but somewhere it was true. So there's also an honouring here of where the story began. And I think it's really important that we don't just kind of try and reject, what the story was. Because if we do that, we're actually rejecting another soul, another part of us. If we're all part of the same, one energy, we're actually rejecting part of ourselves. So there's something about, and it comes back to your point about awareness, about being highly aware and very discerning about what those stories are that we're carrying, and then what we choose to do with it. And if we choose to continue carrying that story, I can't trust other people, well, that's our choice. That's okay, it's your choice. Or your choice might be, I can't always trust other people. Or your choice might be, sometimes you can't trust other people. Or your choice might be, most of the time I can mostly trust other people. You know, it's like, it's that thing, like, and nothing's binary, you know, there are always kind of multiple options. So I think that thing about really paying mindful attention to what the stories are and what are the stories that we're telling ourselves. And one of the things that I do with my clients, and I again, this is something that's like floating around, bubbling about, has been for a little while, is this concept of disentangling ourselves. And so often I think we get kind of caught up in stuff that keeps us very stuck and rigid. And it might be people, it might be places, beliefs, behaviours, systems that we're part of, and also the stories that we carry. So by really gently disentangling, you know, I think this is something to do with my hair, you know, Gemma. Like it feels like I have a choice. When my hair is like really knotted, I could do what I always used to do and just yank a brush through it.
Yeah.
And now I'm so kind of tender with her. I'm like really careful. And it's that is an act of self-compassion. So very gently disentangling ourselves from these things, from these stories, is part of how we can then create a bit of clarity in our life and reveal ourselves as our authentic selves.
It's actually brought some emotion. I don't know why, but it's because I feel so deeply everything. That concept of your hair, I think what you've brought together there so beautifully is, and as someone who has really thick hair, like I can completely resonate. And yeah, how many times do we, so, you know, relating that back to the conversation we were having about like beating ourselves up about things that happened where we didn't respond, how many times do we metaphorically yank a comb through our hair in that scenario, which we know further down the line we're going to have, I just love this as a metaphor, which, you know, further down the line we're going to have split ends, we're going to go to the hairdressers, they're going to say, what on earth have you done to your hair? And as opposed to that gentle disentanglement and unweaving of like almost breaking it down and looking at it, and then putting we'll say grass, blade of grass or rose petal between the stimulus and response, throughout that gentle disentanglement. That's such a beautiful analogy. That's really touched me, that analogy.
And I love, it's this thing of it's also that we carry all of this with us, and sometimes, you know, just to kind of continue the metaphor, really, you know, our hair, like we do leave like strands of hair, like we all do leave strands of hair around because it's time for it to go. Whereas if we're yanking a brush through it, we're pulling the hair out, and actually that kind of comes back to that thing about, you know, letting stuff be rather than like trying to like cut a tie with a belief. It's like, okay, I have that belief, I can let that belief be and let it go in its own time, or not. It might stay with you forever. It might be a really, really, really deeply held one, and that's okay, as long as you're not being driven by it in a way that is unconscious. So always that kind of mindful awareness.
I love that. And I loved what you said before around the you know, us all being connected and not you know, allowing that part of ourselves to be part of ourselves as well. I think there's something really, just to like pick up on that you said a little while ago, actually. I just wanted to I think there's something in that which does relate to the hair analogy as well, which is just so beautiful. So Thank you, Henny. You always touch me in some way, like without this trying to make this sound really inappropriate. Like you emotionally touch me. Yeah, it's amazing. So we're coming towards the end of the podcast, Henny. Is there anything else you'd like to share before I ask you the question that I ask all my podcast guests when I remember?
No, Gemma, go on, hit me with the question, because yeah, hit me, and
So,
I'm gonna.
off the top of your head in the moment, if you were to give the listeners one tip to help them connect to their most authentic, and we'll put in there compassionate selves, what would it be?
I think the answer has to be hand on the heart, actually, Gemma. Because there is something immensely powerful about physical touch. And so often what we're actually talking about when we're talking about a compassion journey is about learning how to parent ourselves. And that touch, that tender touch of compassion on our own heart with our own hand is part of that process of, extending love to ourselves. And the biology of it is that it releases oxytocin. Is that your cat?
Ziggy's getting involved in the conversation as usual. He's saying we should all have lots of self-love because he sleeps all day, so he's full of it.
So just that, so this act, it releases oxytocin in our system, which basically means that we can start to rebalance some of those other hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, those stress hormones. And oxytocin is the caregiving hormone. It's the hormone that's released when mothers produce milk for their baby. It's that bonding hormone. So we can actually do that for ourselves. I mean, I just find that the most astonishingly beautiful thing, that we can release a caregiving hormone for ourselves. Isn't that the most kind of profound act of compassion? But also when we do that, we're relaxed. We activate our parasympathetic nervous system, brings us into a state of rest and repair, and when we're there, then we can show up authentically.
That is so beautiful, Henny. Thank you for sharing. And is that not just evidence enough that our bodies can do that, and we can create that oxytocin for ourselves, that actually that nourishment, that self-care and compassion is something that's so innately within us that our bodies are designed to do. I have the same conversations about pleasure. Like, our bodies would not do what they do if we weren't meant to feel that. So thank you so much. That is a beautiful tip, and I love that you've explained the science behind that as well, because I am a little bit of a science geek sometimes, so that appeals to that side of me. So thank you so much, Henny. It's been a pleasure. So how can we get in touch with you, for those listening? How can people work with you?
I'm on Instagram as Henny_Flynn, so that's probably the easiest thing. And you can also find me as the Compassionate Menopause as well. So I do a lot of work with women experiencing perimenopause and menopause, and unsurprisingly, it's all about creating this bedrock of compassion. And you can always email me or just come to the website, which is hennyflynn.co.uk. And Gemma, also just to say, what a lovely conversation. It feels like the most kind of nourishing way. I was absolutely right when I said right at the beginning of this that there's a reason why the timing shifted and I came to have this conversation with you at this particular time. So I feel really grateful for that. Thank you.
I feel really grateful too. Thank you. I feel really nourished, and it's been some beautiful reminders for me, and I know that it will absolutely be for the audience too. I know for those that came on the retreat that we did together in 2020 that so many people resonated with you. So, and I know some of them continue to follow you now, so they'll be listening, I'm sure. So thank you so much, Henny. It's been an absolute pleasure. What a lovely way to end the week. What a lovely way to end into August. Thank you so much for being my guest today.
Oh, thank you, Gemma.